What's up guys, and welcome back to another video, another celebrity car collection video where we're going to look over a celebrity's personal, private car collection. Now you know how it works. All you have to do is comment down below the name of a celebrity you'd like us to cover in a future video, and we'll be taking the person who's the most recurring in the comments. Also, if you haven't yet subscribed to this channel, why don't you hit that button down there and also the bell right next to it so that you know when we post another video. Anyways, let's get right into it. Today we are talking about Top Gear presenter Jeremy Clarkson. I'm sure you all know Jeremy Clarkson, probably the most legendary car reviewer, car TV host of all time. With a net worth estimated at over £60 million. He definitely has the means to buy himself quite a few cool cars. But what is actually in his private car collection? I've been wondering about this for quite some time because he gets lent pretty much any car. Anything he could dream of, companies will lend to him for extended periods of time. So what has he actually gone out and bought with his own money? It's very, very hard to find, obviously, because there are so many photos of him in different cars. It's hard to know which are actually his. We're going to be talking about McLaren P1, we're going to be talking Ferrari, we're going to be talking Lamborghini, Black Series, Ford GT, loads of cool things. But we're going to start with the Volvo XC90. Not the most exciting car, definitely in the collection, but a very convenient, practical car. Clarkson has several kids, so he needs to have a practical car to drive them around in, and he's actually bought 3 Volvo XC90s over the years, so clearly one that he quite enjoys. Mainly down to, as he says, the safety of the car. Clarkson also famously said that you cannot be qualified as a petrol head unless you have owned an Alfa Romeo. Now he himself ticked that box by owning an Alfa Romeo GT V6. Legendary car made between 74 and 87, over 100,000 were made. Now he actually regretfully sold his quite a few years back, but when filming an episode of the Grand Tour with another one of these cars, he actually announced that rather than the car going into the endless abyss of all of the Top Gear or Grand Tour cars, he was going to take this one home with him. So we can assume that this is another car which now sits in his garage, which is very cool. Another slightly classic car made between 71 and 74 is the BMW 3-litre CSL, which Clarkson actually bought before he became really famous on TV. This was one of his first kind of connoisseur cars that he had. Really cool looking. They've gone up in value quite a bit. Sadly, sold it though. One of his more famous cars, because it featured on Top Gear, was his, or is, he still owns it, is Mercedes-Benz 600 Grosser. His was built in the 60s and actually had some pretty famous, reportedly, previous owners, Jack Nicholson and Elvis Presley, which is pretty cool now that you consider that Clarkson now owns it. It's got a really cool history. Now, just over 2,500 of these were made. Most of them, or 2,190, were made in short wheelbase, over 400 in long wheelbase, and then just around 60 in Landaulet mode, which is a pretty rare car, but you can't find many of those. Now, Jeremy Clarkson's one is a long wheelbase, awesome thing, which featured on an episode of Top Gear, as I mentioned, with James May in his classic Rolls Royce. Now, Clarkson's always said that his first big car purchase, his first real supercar, was his Ferrari 355 GTS. Pretty epic car, V8, 375 horsepower. Awesome thing. They've actually shot up quite a bit in value over the years. He reportedly was disappointed with the fact that he went for the GTS, which was a Targa. So you could get it as a coupe, as a Spyder, and as a Targa, which was a removable hardtop. About 2,500 Targas were made. Only about 430 actually with the F1 flappy paddle gearbox. The rest were manual, so safe to assume that his was a manual. Really cool car, and effectively one of the only Ferraris we know that he's actually been associated to owning. He's driven a lot around, but that he's actually owned, it's maybe one of the only ones. He didn't hang around. He then bought himself a Lamborghini Gallardo Spyder. Now, he didn't really like the coupe, as we could see on some of the Top Gear reviews, but he went and bought himself a Spyder, which was 510 horsepower, 5-litre, naturally aspirated V10. Pretty cool, apart from the fact that apparently the seat used to rub against the back of the car because of how tall he was. He had to put it all the way around back, but really cool car that he was reportedly driving around quite a bit back in the day. One which I didn't really expect was his Aston Martin Virage. So made between 2011 and 2012. It was only made for a year. It wasn't a particularly successful Aston because it was kind of in between a DB9, DBS, Vanquish. It was a weird in-between car, which never really found its place within the brand Aston Martin itself. But Jeremy Clarkson reportedly bought one and drove it around for a fair amount. Don't know if he still has it or not, but that surprised me a little bit. I mean, it is a V12, massive, over 6-litre V12, single clutch, flappy paddle gearbox. I wasn't necessarily expecting that, to be honest. One of his most famous cars and rarest cars is his COK Black Series. Super rare. I believe he still owns this. 500 units were ever made, with 349 actually staying, well, when they were first made in the US, so not many at all in Europe or the UK. Massive V8, 500 horsepower. It's got a 7-speed single clutch flappy paddle gearbox, which isn't the best in the world, really slow, but it looks epic. It's basically a road-going version of a COK DTM. There was a special edition DTM road-going COK, but this Black Series was the more famous one that was ever made, and awesome looking, basically all in silver. So yeah, no, really, really cool car, and he actually spoke about this quite a bit on Top Gear back in the day. Probably Jeremy Clarkson's most famous car was his Ford GT. Now, he had the older, the kind of in-between Ford GT, 2005-2006 car. That's around when they were built. First announced around 2004, 550 horsepower, massive American V8. Really interesting history, obviously, behind these cars, arcing back to the Ford GT40 from the 60s, which had huge amounts of success at Le Mans, the world famous 24-hour race. Now, Jeremy Clarkson bought this car, was very vocal about it. Now, they're pretty rare, actually. There were supposedly 4,500 which are going to be made, but only just over 4,000 reportedly were only ever made, with not that many really coming to Europe. So original UK cars, there really aren't many at all. Jeremy Clarkson's was one of them. Now, it did 205 miles an hour, so it was one of the fastest cars in the world back when it came out. But what made this car so famous is the amount of issues that Clarkson had with it. Richard Hammond has actually been reported saying that it was just because he couldn't figure out the car tracking alarm system on the key. But what ended up happening is, again, reportedly, this has never been confirmed, Clarkson's car was reimbursed after he bought it because of the unreliability of it. So he would have gotten a Ford GT for free, which is pretty cool. He was constantly complaining about the miles per gallon, saying that it did around 4 miles per gallon if you're driving it in a slightly excited way. Awesome looking thing, looks brilliant, sounds fantastic, and obviously the history and the performance it gives you is pretty incredible. So awesome car to see in Clarkson's collection. Another car, before you all start commenting, is the Lexus LFA. I couldn't find stories arcing back to him actually owning one, but he has said that it's the best car he's ever driven. And yeah, knowing that he's driven a bunch of really, really cool cars, that's very, very high praise, but I don't believe he has one in his collection. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. The last car we're going to talk about is the famous P1 OOV, as we call it, because P100V is the license plate. This has been reported by many people. I saw on many websites saying that it was Jeremy Clarkson's car, but it wasn't actually. Well, it isn't. It is a McLaren press car. Press McLaren P1 that they handed out to shows, magazines, YouTubers, whoever it may be, to get some marketing on the back of the McLaren P1 program, which obviously was a really limited program, only limited to 375 units worldwide, close to 1,000 horsepower hybrid hypercar. Now, why is it so linked to Clarkson? Because of this video mainly of him walking out of a restaurant and getting into or being around the car is during filming. So it wasn't actually him just on his own time driving the car around. It was during filming for a series of Top Gear. Or was it the Grand Tour? I can't remember. Anyways, they were filming for one of the TV shows, and because paparazzi photos and car spotter videos came out, a lot of people claimed that it was his car, but it was not, which is a real shame. So to our knowledge, no hypercars in his collection, but it's fairly secretive for someone who's as public in the car world with his personal cars. So there could be more. I'm sure there's some that we've left out, but this is what we could find on our research. So maybe we should do a second video one day if you believe on Clarkson's cars. If you want to hear about Richard Hammond and James May's cars as well, do let us know. It was really fun making this video, researching it. I'm a huge fan of Jeremy Clarkson and what he's put together between Top Gear and the Grand Tour. Very controversial character, of course, but I think he's inspired a lot of us petrol heads over the years. Thanks for watching this video, of course, and if you aren't already, as I mentioned at the beginning, hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back for another video very soon. Remember to comment down below the name of a celebrity you'd like us to talk about next. Cheers, guys. I'll be seeing you very soon. Bye-bye.